Hello everybody, welcome back to another SUPboarder video. In this video we're going to be looking at and comparing the three main foil boards from Starboard: the Wingboard, the Takeoff and the Airfoil. Definitely these three boards are going to be potentially on people's wish list for 2023, and we really hope by the end of this video you've got a pretty good idea of which one of these boards you should potentially be going for. Remember everyone, as always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any future videos, and if you like this video, give it a like. It really makes a difference to how good we feel. So Starboard, the brand, have been involved in the water sports industry for a very long time. They first started in windsurfing and then they moved into SUPs, foil boards. They've also got their partnership with Air Rush to bring you the free wing range of wings. And these are the three latest boards that they have in their wing foiling and foiling range. So this is actually really going to be quite an interesting video because these boards are very, very different. We're going to be looking at the slightly bigger Wingboard from Starboard. This is a 6'3" by 28.5. Then we're going to be talking about the newer Takeoff, a much shorter, more compact board that's 5'2" by 27. And then we're going to be talking about the Airfoil. This is the 5'8" by 28. The way I'm going to lay this video out is going to give you some detailed design features on each of the boards, then going to be talking about the cons and pros of the boards, how they were to ride on the water, and really give you a good summary of who should be buying what board at the end of each of their sections. I'm going to start off first with the Wingboard, then move on to the Takeoff, and then finish off with the Airfoil. So let's move on and have a look at the Starboard Wingboard. Probably one of the most common boards you're going to see out on the water. A lot of you have been getting into the sport with this board. We used it for that series of beginner videos to get yourself into wing foiling. Starboard say the aim of the wing foil board is to give you the maximum performance in a small size while catering to your level, from beginner to expert. So it really is a board that will do it all for all levels. Some of the key Starboard design features that they've got on this board: you've got a nice big recessed deck, which we personally find really nice to use, great when doing transitions and jibes. You've got large boxy rails, therefore the board's packed with a lot of volume, which obviously means you can use a board that's much smaller but still has that volume in the board. They've rounded off the nose on this one compared to some other equivalent brands with their more square noses. They found that definitely having the more rounded nose has a bit less surface area, therefore it doesn't catch maybe if you're going to a bump or a wave, and it isn't so slow or sticky when you're trying to get up onto the foil, having a more rounded nose. The drainage channels on the top and back of the board are definitely something that stands out for us, but we really like the way that that drainage channel incorporates the recessed deck to give you that nice concave lower feeling when you're riding as well. But right at the back of the board you will find that there is still quite a lot of volume in that tail, which is great for when you're obviously getting into the sport and you're not on the foil yet or you're using it in choppy waters. The board doesn't sink and become quite hard to use. The rocker line shape of these boards is pretty flat throughout, and especially at the tail shape. Very flat towards the back of the board, but there is a huge amount of channel, bottom shape and tail cutaway shapes on that board. A lot of that has been put on this board and been taken away from the windsurf foiling, the Olympic class foiling, where it really helps those boards get up onto the foil very, very quickly, and they've put that onto this board as well. Looking at the foil box, and it's slightly different from the other two as it's a bit further forward on the board. It does make it very user friendly, and it means you could also get away with a few more different brands of foils. Lots of foot strap positions on this board, so you can ride it in the more traditional sort of offset front strap or a center strap, and they're a little bit wider than they used to be. Starboard have gone a little bit wider with their foot straps, so you can have a bigger foot strap that allows you to move your foot around in the foot strap to give you a bit of more of a micro adjustment when you're riding your board. And like many of Starboard boards, the carry handle is just at the bottom of this board. So you can see on the screen it's available in a large range of sizes. And there's also some sizes in there that are very similar to the Takeoff board as well. So I know that many of you might be wondering whether to go for a Wingboard or a Takeoff board because the sizes are quite close in some of those boards, but hopefully this video will help you understand which one of those is right for you. Now I'm going to move on to some cons and give you an idea of who we think it'll best suit. With the cons, to be fair, the Wingboard hasn't actually got that many cons. One of the cons, it does touch down smoothly, but it's definitely much better if you're going straight across the wind in a straight direction when you touch down. Because of those high boxy sides and the cutaways on the rails, if you're going into maybe a more advanced turn and you clip the rail further back, you will feel it catch a little bit on the Wingboard. This is definitely going to be more of an issue if you're more of an advanced rider, maybe trying to do certain freestyle tricks or really trying to push it into the waves a little bit more, where you will be catching that rail a lot more than you will be doing more in flat water. And the other con is something that we've noticed looking at the range of boards that they have. They've got some bigger boards right down to smaller boards, and they generally get smaller in length and in width. But this board, the 6'3" by 28.5, sort of sits on its own. So if you're jumping down from a 7-foot board and you don't want to go to a 5'2" board, you go into the 6'3" size, which makes sense. But you jump down in the width to 28.5, and the 5'2" is actually wider than this board. So the sizing is, I'm not going to say it's off, it's just an observation that if you wanted a smaller board than 7 foot, but you still wanted a width there to give you that extra stability and volume, you're going to have to go a little bit narrower. But if you are one of those people looking for that board of this length, but with a bit more width, then there is the board in the 6'4" Takeoff, which we'll speak about in a minute. That would fill that gap. But the pros, it's a great entry-level board to get into the sport. It is probably the easiest board that we've used to jibe and go into turns because of that concave deck. The stability of this board is fantastic. A good amount of volume throughout the whole of the board from nose to tail. Very, very stable when you're not on the foil or using it in choppier waters. The foil box placement is good for a lot of brands, not just Starboard. For most of the time, it does have a smooth landing if you're coming off of the foil. And it does really release and get onto the foil very, very easily, especially if you don't know good pumping or good trimming with your board and wing. This sort of board will get you onto the foil easier than many other boards on the market. Who do we think would best suit the wingboard from Starboard? Well, it's going to be ideal for a complete beginner to advanced rider. The board has got some great design features and it does get up in those lighter winds really easily. It will work in the waves as well with your wing, and you can even take it SUP foiling, but it won't give you as much performance as the Takeoff because that board is much, much shorter. But really it's designed for somebody who's a bit more flat water focused. Now moving on to the Takeoff. Starboard say the Takeoff is the foiler's go-to board for wing, foil, surf and foil downwinding. It's a true all-rounder board that caters for everyone from a first-time foiler to experienced foilers. Now, because Starboard have got a pretty generous range of boards in the Takeoff as well, it will cater for the beginner rider, that is true, but it is a little bit of a different beast compared to its wingboard brother. There are some design features that are exactly the same. It still has that recessed deck to get you lower in the board. It still has a sort of drainage channel at the back and the top of the deck, but instead of having two like on the wingboard, it has one down the middle of the board. Still has fairly big boxy rails throughout most of the board, and there is still a sort of mini sharp release edge as well on the board, not as big as the one on the wingboard. The things that are different from the wingboard, it has much more of a chine on the rail or an angle that's almost been cut out away from the rail. The wingboard has a much squarer rail throughout the board. The foil box placement is different to the wingboard. It's much, much further back on the board. You'll see there isn't much board behind that foil box. It's the same length of foil box, but it is placed differently on the board. And the back has got a sort of cutaway, but it's not as severe as on the wingboard. The rocker line is still pretty flat throughout. They're still trying to make the board as fast as possible, and they're still trying to make the board so it releases quickly to get up into the foil early as well. Foot strap placement, still the same. You still get loads of choices of foot straps, and you still got those wider foot strap placements as well. You still got a single carry handle at the bottom, just like the wingboard. The big difference of the Takeoff is it's just much shorter in its overall length and generally a little bit wider. And the rails are thicker throughout the whole board, so it does have more volume than the equivalent boards in the wingboard. As I said earlier, the wingboard is missing a gap sort of on the 6'3" board that's a little bit wider. This has that board, this has the 6'4". If you're unaware of the big advantage of going for a shorter foil board, is it's to do with the reduced swing weight or the reduced weight in front of your standing area. So it's going to be easier for you to pump, jibe, turn, maneuver, jump, anything when you're up on the foil is going to be easier when you've got less board in front of your foot. Therefore, it's going to be pushing for the better level riders, or it's gearing itself up for that higher level rider. The disadvantage to having a shorter board is it requires a little bit more knowledge of how to use your board or your foil effectively to get up onto the foil. So you are going to have a much more lively throw aroundable board in any of the takeoffs equivalent to the longer wingboards. If I can move into cons, negatives, things to be aware of with the takeoff is when you are going to touch down, you are going to have a more aggressive touchdown because you've got a much shorter board. Now it's not only because of that, the takeoff has one other thing which is a pro, which we'll speak about in a second, but it's a negative as well because there's a lot of volume up here in the nose. You find that when it does touch down, there's less rocker here to let you touch down gently. Some other boards on the market, they've got a little bit less volume up in the nose there, so there when you do touch down, it's a little bit smoother on that touchdown, but they've got less volume. And obviously there's a flip side on that is it's not going to be as stable. So there's more volume in this board than those equivalent boards. Another thing to definitely be aware of with the takeoff is the foil box placement. This really works obviously perfectly with the starboard foils. The foil box itself is quite far towards the back of the board. We've tested this board with quite a few other foil brands and we did find that we had to ride it quite far forward in the box, and if we were then trying to use it with the foot straps, we couldn't quite find the optimum position between foil and foot strap placement. Use it with a starboard foil, it's perfect. It's everything set up perfectly. So definitely an observation. If you're going to be buying one, maybe try have a go, see what other foils, what other people are using these foils with and what foils are working with them. Find that out beforehand. That will definitely help make sure you get the right setup will work well with this board. But of course, there is pros to all those negatives. The pros to having the foil box right at the back is it means you can pump, get in the foot straps and get your foil board up and on the foil very quickly. It's a short, compact board with a lot of volume, so actually it is very easy to stand on for the size. Definitely this did not feel like a 5'2" board at 27 wide. It's packed full of volume and it's right up towards the nose, so it's very easy to stand on, easier than the equivalent boards with the more refined nose shape. So you can see, and there's always pros and cons, they always go hand in hand. The concave deck is very nice. I can see why a lot of people are using this board strapless, because it really is focusing all that effort towards the center line of the board. And there's lots of sizes in the takeoff as well, so I can see there's going to be a large range of people that could potentially get into the sport and use the takeoff as their go-to board. But who do we think the takeoff will actually best suit? Well, we believe it's definitely going to be best for a improving beginner, intermediate to advanced rider. So you're going to need to understand how to get the best out of your foil. You're going to need to really know the basics of what's going on under your feet. Then it's going to come up much quicker, maybe with a bit of pumping compared to its equivalent wingboard brother. Now the board does work well in a wide range of conditions, but it is much happier in the open seas and choppier waters, and throwing more turns, tighter turns, getting in more critical sections of the wave. Because it's much shorter, much more compact, the board doesn't catch in any wave face or water. Freestylers of course will love this board again for being more compact. So we do agree with Starboard that it is a one board that will do it all, but if you're wanting to push the level a little bit more, the Takeoff is the board to move on to. And the wingboard is definitely better for that flatter water, easier riding experience. Okay, now let's move on to the Airfoil board from Starboard. Now this is a little bit more exciting really, to be honest, not because these boards aren't good. These boards are great boards, but this board is packed full of innovation that nobody else has got on the market, and that's always an exciting thing to talk about. Starboard are aiming for exactly the same sort of rider as the wingboard. Some of the key Starboard design features that they've got on this board, the big one is the way that the foil is attached to the board. There is an aluminium plate, you can probably clearly see it, underneath the deck pad where the foil is bolted directly to. So opposite to maybe all the other inflatable foil boards on the market where you bolt your foil onto the bottom of the board, the very traditional way of doing stuff, the way that you would do with a hard composite board. This is bolting the foil through the bottom of the board and actually almost directly under your feet. I think Starboard say it's like less than 1.5, less than 2 centimeters, I think, from your foot to the top of the foil plate. Now, from a riding point of view, that's always going to be better because you're riding directly on top of the foil. You're basically closer to the foil as possible. It is going to give you a more direct feel. Now, the great thing about this aluminium plate is that the foot straps, the foil, you, you're all on it. You're using this plate. You are on a completely rigid surface. So it's almost like riding an aluminium small board, but then with an inflatable board below it. That's the way I think about it when I was riding it. I'm actually using a really small board, but with this large stable platform below it. The foot straps, because they're on the aluminium plate, they can be screwed into the aluminium plate, which means it's impossible, I'm going to say it's impossible to rip your foot straps out, because it was a thing when inflatable foil boards first started coming out maybe 2 years ago. When we first started seeing them, we were like, well, the foot straps are only going to be stuck on with glue. So that's, you know, if you really crash hard, you're going to potentially pull those foot straps off. I don't know how many of you out there have done that, but it was always something that we were thinking about. With this, it's just not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen. You're more likely to rip your foot straps out of a composite board with glass and carbon than you are a sheet of aluminium. So that is a really, really big thumbs up. The other nice thing, because you have put your foils directly onto this aluminium plate, you can actually move your foil a little bit as well. So you've got a little bit of movement there. It's only about 5 centimeters, but it is a bit more movement. Keeping a look at the bottom board, you'll see that there's an edge release going around a majority of the board. That's got a much squarer edge. It's going to do exactly the same thing, or trying to do exactly the same thing as the other boards. It's going to release that water quicker. It's going to produce less drag, less turbulence off the back of the board. One of the big points I need to speak about with this is the construction of this board. Now, if you're into paddleboarding and you've watched some other inflatable paddleboard reviews, you're probably aware or heard me speak about welded rails. Now, welded rails are where instead of the rails being glued together, they are melted and welded together. So what happens is they have 2 layers of PVC. This stuff's basically all made of PVC. And they get the PVC, they melt the inside of the PVC and the inside of the PVC, and then they stick that PVC together, and then it mechanically bonds itself. So there's no glue involved in the making of the rails of the board, which is how you keep the board airtight. So over years and years and years, that should not come undone or should not degrade, which we are starting to see now. Actually, to be fair, we started to see that about 4 years ago with some inflatable paddleboards that have not got welded rails. So if you're new to it, welded rails, they're basically only a good thing, and really you should be looking for boards with welded rails at the moment. And to be fair, Starboard are the pioneers of welded rails, and as far as I'm aware, still think there's a few brands that have started to do it now, but definitely Starboard need the cred and the satisfaction that they've done the best welded rails out there. So welded rails, really great move on this board. Looking at the outline shape of the board, it still has the same characteristics as the other boards: rounded nose, similar rounded sort of square tail. With inflatable boards in general, there isn't that much you can really do with them. So really it's to do with what's stuck onto the boards and how they are put together, which makes the real difference. And that's why this one is pretty amazing with the way the foot straps are put on and the foil is attached to the plate itself. Now I'm going to speak about the process of putting this board together, because when I first saw the video of Raoul doing it, I did think, oh, this looks a little bit complicated, a bit hard to put your foil on the bottom of the board and turn it over. But to be fair, it is actually very, very simple, and it's pretty quick. You need to turn the board over and put your mast or your foil through the bottom of the board or onto the plate. Get your foil attached, do it up by hand, do it as tight as you can, and then you want to inflate your board. But before you do that, you need to put the EPP plug around the actual foil mast and tuck the sort of skirt material, let's say, of the PVC around the base of that plug. And then as you inflate the board with the inflation valve underneath at the front of the board, it then wraps up around that EPP plug. Now, I initially thought that would be really hard to do when I saw that video. I thought, oh, that looks really easy, but I bet it's not. But actually, it is actually very easy. And we did it a couple of times and it didn't really ride up or didn't go over. It just inflated really easily. And also, it actually inflated very quickly because you're using a double action pump, a really nice pump from Starboard. And it's very comfortable, very easy to use, and it gets the air in incredibly quickly. So it's not a process that takes a long time. I mean, we're talking maybe less than a minute to inflate your board. So it's not in fact, you could even say less than 2 minutes to the whole process. Putting your foil on, and not building your foil, but putting your foil on and inflating your board. So definitely it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, and I'm quite impressed with how they put it all together. So before we move on to the pros and cons and other stuff about the boards, I want to talk about the package. You get a really nice bag, which is actually a bag made out of recycled bottles. It is a fairly big bag because you've got this aluminium plate which you cannot fold. But the real advantage of that, and what I love, is how you can get everything for your session in that bag. So you can get your foil, you can get your wing, you can get your paddle if you've got a 3-piece paddle, and put that all in that bag. It's really nice that you get a leash, a coiled good quality starboard leash as standard. That's a nice little feature. And it's also really nice that you get the foot straps as standard as well. They have got a few sizes in the range, which is nice. So a lot of different people, different sizes, different abilities could be looking at the different size boards, but they haven't got as many boards in their range as the Composite brothers. So now let's talk about the cons, or things to be aware of with the airfoil. Okay, first point is a really interesting thing, and Starboard do say it clearly in a lot of their brochures and videos online. You're going to need to be riding this with a longer mast, or understand that when you are riding it with your normal foil, you're going to be losing about 12 centimeters of length because it's attached to the middle top of the board. So it's attached to that aluminium plate directly here. So you're going to lose that length. So for us, riding this starboard foil and then riding the same foil on all the boards and coming on this one, we did instantly lose 12 centimeters. And it did take us a little bit of time to get used to it. And just like the Takeoff, the foil box is quite far back on the board as well, and that does affect, you know, where your feet are going to go in relation to the foil and the foot straps and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit more of something to be aware of. Again, treat it similar to, like I said, about the Takeoff. It works really well with Starboard branded foils. An observation when flying, it does feel a little bit nose heavy, a bit more heavier overall compared to this sort of equivalent composite boards especially. There's a lot on this board, and obviously to make the board stiff and give it that direct feel. The bottom of the board, obviously you've got your handle and you've got your valve at the bottom of the board, and you've got that sort of indentation of that EPP plug. That does make the board very slow to paddle if you want to be getting SUP surfing, and it does make it a little bit slow obviously to track across the water to get up onto the foil. When you get enough power, you get a big enough wave or a steep enough takeoff, or you get enough power with your wing, it doesn't really affect it, but obviously that is going to slow the board down, having those external things sticking out and the bump underneath. And the ironic thing about the smaller boards in this inflatable range is that bag is almost the same size as like the equivalent size smaller Takeoff. So if you're going to be looking for this in the ways you think it's more transportable, I think the smaller ones, there's still a biggish amount of size in the bag itself. But then if you put all your foil and your wing and everything in that, it still makes it pretty transportable. It's definitely something to be aware of. It's not as small when it's compacted or folded down compared to other branded inflatable foil boards, but it's not as good as those either. So that's definitely a flip side. But definitely the biggest thing we found when riding it is the way it can suck and drag you down when you catch an edge, a rail, or you're not trimming perfectly flat. If you're going into a jibe and you go and you drop down on your foil, maybe because you're not used to your mast lengths or something, and you drop down to your foil and the edge catches, it's basically 9 times out of 10, we found it was game over. It would suck, it would drag, it would pull you down, and it would basically roll you over. It's probably due to the inflatable nature of the board, and lots of other inflatable foil boards are the same, but the rails themselves, the rails that help the release, we do find personally catch quite a lot because they are quite far forward on the board. Now, no doubt Starboard have done a lot of testing with this rail edge, and you'll see there's a flip side to the Pro in a minute, but they do catch when you touch down, especially if you're going on rail, if you're turning around a corner, which is most of the time when you're not flying at the right height anyway, and that is definitely the biggest observation. And the last negative is around the EPP plug. For example, when I unpacked the board with Will, we were getting all the stuff out, it's all lovely wrapped in paper and it's all recycled stuff and looks great, and then Will had this thing and he just put it aside because he thought it was part of the packaging. He thought it was the way to keep the foil out and stop damaging it when you transport it or something. I said, oh no, that goes in the board, we need to use that. And he was like, really? So it does look a little bit, do I dare say the word cheap, but it does do the job, it works really well, it doesn't absorb water. No doubt it's been sustainably resourced from Starboard, so I can see why they've put it in, but it's a little bit of an observation when you look at it from the outsider's point of view. But really, every one of those cons has got a massive positive. The weight of the board, it's as stiff as anything. You're standing on an aluminium plate that has an incredible direct feel. Well, it is a direct feel to the foil. The best and most responsive direct feel we've ever used with any inflatable foil board. The foot straps are great, and they are screwed into an aluminium plate, and they come as standard, which is such a great move. Flipping the board over, talking about the edge release, this was the big negative, as in the edge release was quite far forward, and if you buried that rail it would really suck. Well, the flip side is it does release the water well. When we first got on the board, this is the first experience, I didn't think it was that quick. I didn't think it really released because I was trying to get up onto the foil in my dead reach position. I'm trying to go across the wind, pump, 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 and it got up. But then I started to tune my technique, started to bear away a little bit, let the board get a bit more momentum, let it have less sideways drag, let's say, going downwind, and the release just really makes the board get up easy. Much, much easier. That's a big, big pro and a big thing you need to stress. Just bear off the wind a little bit, not very much, just a little bit. And those edge releases, you can almost feel like somebody takes a handbrake off and you just start flying. So it does get up much, much easier than any other inflatable foil board we've used in the past. So that's definitely the pro to those long edges, which is possibly why Starboard have kept them quite far forward on the board. The edge release will actually help you paddle the board as well if you're going to be catching some foiling waves. Remember, the board's not going to be the quickest because of the handle and the valve and everything else, but it will definitely help you paddle in that straighter line opposed to boards without the longer edge release. The inflation process is really quick. I thought it was going to be much, much longer, but definitely is not a problem. The bag is big, but you can get everything in it, and that is a really nice move and nice to keep everything in one place. And if you're traveling, living in a flat, you have everything in the bag and you know it's in there, ready to go. Even your wetsuit when it's dried off, it's a great little kit bag there, ready to go. Now, when we first got a look at this new sort of system and how the foil was attached to the aluminium plate, we thought that we couldn't actually get the foil off with the board inflated, but you actually can take the foil off with the board inflated. Just simply undo the bolts, just pull the EPP plug straight off of the board with your foil as well. And you can actually even put your foil back in, bolt it back up, and then slide the EPP plug back in position to carry on foiling, which is a really great move. And when we first saw this, we didn't think this was possible. So who do we think will best suit the airfoil board from Starboard? Well, yes, it is going to be a good range of riders. You could get on this as a complete beginner to an advanced rider. Just bear in mind, if you are a complete beginner, it still won't be as easy to use as definitely the board like this wingboard. It hasn't got that design features, hasn't got that concave deck. Because of that stiffness, you're going to find if you are a better rider trying to throw into turns, get into surf, be a little bit more extreme, it will allow you to do that. But obviously you're going to have to bear in mind the mast length is shorter, and if you do catch an edge, it will suck you down. Obviously, if you're looking for a small, more transportable board, but also because it's an inflatable, it is incredibly hard wearing as well. So maybe if you're really hard on your kit, you should also be looking at the airfoil. And it is packed full of innovation. So there we go. Hopefully there's some information there that you can come away and understand which one of these boards will be right for you. Starboard have got 3 great boards in their range. We can see why every one is there. The Takeoff, the more compact board that's going to be better for people that want to push the limits a little bit more, but still have a volume, and a board that's relatively easy to ride under their feet. The Wingboard is still the easiest board to get into wing for sure. Great sizes, easy smooth takeoff, lovely concave deck, and a little bit longer overall does make it a little bit easier compared to the Takeoff. And the airfoil, well, it does everything that the other boards would do. It's a little bit more technical to ride because it hasn't got that refined bottom and nose shape like these boards have got, but it's an incredibly transportable and a very hard wearing foil board, and it's got that amazing plate that you are standing on and completely connected to your foil. If you've used any of these boards, let us know your comments. If you've got any comments and questions, please let us know. We'll see you on another SUPboarder video really soon. Thank you very much.